fall asleep to the entire story of the Barbary Pirates, masters of the Mediterranean, where the sea never truly slept. The Mediterranean has always looked deceptively peaceful from a distance. Stand on a quiet shoreline just before dawn. The water barely moves. Tiny waves fold gently onto smooth stones. Somewhere in the darkness, a gull complains to no one in particular. The salt air carries the scent of seaweed, damp wood, and old fishing nets drying overnight. Everything feels calm, safe even. But appearances have always been one of the Mediterranean's greatest tricks. For thousands of years, this sea was less like a peaceful lake and more like a crowded highway with remarkably poor traffic laws. Merchant ships drifted alongside war fleets. Pilgrims crossed paths with smugglers. Fishermen watched kingdoms rise and disappear over the horizon. Every harbor promised profit. Every horizon concealed danger. And if you happened to be sailing between Spain, Italy, Greece, or the coast of North Africa sometime between the 16th and early 19th centuries, there was always a lingering possibility that the next sail appearing through the morning mist did not belong to a friendly trader. Instead, it belonged to men whose reputations spread farther than their ships ever could. The Barbary Pirates, or perhaps more accurately, the Barbary Corsairs. The distinction mattered greatly to them. Pirates, after all, stole for themselves. Corsairs often claimed they stole for God, for empire, for revenge, or for perfectly respectable legal reasons that somehow still involved taking absolutely everything you owned. History has always had a talent for creative paperwork. Tonight, as the world outside grows quieter, we're going to drift slowly across those restless waters. We'll visit bustling ports where dozens of languages echoed through crowded marketplaces. We'll stand beneath towering stone walls overlooking crowded harbors. We'll hear the creaking of wooden hulls before sunrise and watch captains calculate the wind with practiced eyes. We'll meet kings and slaves, merchants and admirals, prisoners who vanished from sleepy villages, and men whose names became nightmares whispered from Ireland to Sicily. But before the famous raids, before the legendary admirals, before the Ottoman banners snapped proudly over North African ports, we need to understand the sea itself, because the Mediterranean created the Barbary pirates long before the pirates ruled the Mediterranean. Imagine unfolding an enormous map across a wooden table. The Mediterranean appears almost intimate compared to the Atlantic Ocean. It isn't especially large, yet every coastline touches another civilization. Europe stretches along its northern edge. Africa guards the south. Asia waits patiently in the east. Three continents stare at one another across remarkably little water. That geography changed everything. Unlike sailors crossing vast oceans where weeks might pass without sight of land, Mediterranean mariners usually remained within reach of a coastline. Islands dotted nearly every route. Safe anchorages appeared every few days, which meant something wonderfully convenient. Ships carrying silk, gold, wine, olive oil, grain, timber, weapons, or spices, all followed fairly predictable paths, and predictable traffic tends to attract ambitious thieves. Human nature, unfortunately, has remained remarkably consistent for several thousand years. Long before anyone ever used the phrase Barbary pirate, the Mediterranean already had sea raiders. Ancient Greek writers complained endlessly about piracy. Roman merchants feared pirate fleets operating from hidden coves. Even Julius Caesar himself had once been kidnapped by pirates. Rather famously, he joked with them during captivity, then later returned with warships, captured every one of them, and crucified them, which was admittedly an extreme customer satisfaction policy. Rome eventually reduced piracy through overwhelming naval power. For centuries, Roman fleets kept shipping lanes relatively secure. Merchants grew wealthy. Ports flourished. Cities expanded. Peace at sea became something people almost forgot required constant maintenance. Then, Rome fell, not all at once. Empires rarely do. Instead, authority slowly dissolved. Naval patrols became less frequent. Regional kingdoms focused on surviving one another rather than protecting distant trade routes. The sea sensed weakness. Raiders returned. By the early Middle Ages, Viking longships attacked from the north. Arab fleets expanded from the south and east. Italian city-states armed merchant vessels. Byzantine captains fought to preserve shrinking territories. Everyone possessed ships. Everyone possessed enemies. And nearly everyone occasionally borrowed someone else's cargo without permission. Sometimes entire towns disappeared overnight. Sometimes coastal monasteries awoke to burning villages. Sometimes fishermen simply never came home. The Mediterranean remained wealthy. But wealth without security has always attracted attention. Now drift southward. Leave Italy behind. Watch Sicily disappear into morning haze. Ahead rises the coastline of North Africa. Golden hills meet deep blue water. White buildings gleam beneath relentless sunshine. Palm trees sway lazily above fortified walls. From a distance, everything appears peaceful. Closer. The ports reveal another story. Algiers. Tunis. Tripoli. Later, sail across the Atlantic Gateway. These cities would become synonymous with piracy. Yet none began that way. Long before Corsairs arrived, North Africa possessed an astonishingly rich history. Phoenicians established colonies here. Carthage challenged Rome itself. Roman provinces flourished. Christian bishops debated theology. Berber kingdoms rose and fell. Arab armies transformed politics, religion, and language after the 7th century. Empires succeeded empires. Dynasties replaced dynasties. Trade never truly stopped. The sea connected everyone. By the 15th century, North Africa was a tapestry of cultures. Berber tribes moved across inland mountains. Arab merchants dominated marketplaces. Jewish communities preserved traditions stretching back centuries. Former Andalusians, expelled from Spain, sought new homes. African caravans crossed the Sahara carrying gold and salt. Ottoman envoys arrived from the east. European merchants appeared despite political tensions. Every harbor echoed with dozens of languages. Every marketplace smelled of spices, leather, fresh bread, livestock, incense, and sea salt. Life buzzed continuously. Then history accelerated. In 1492, one event changed both Europe and North Africa forever. Granada fell. The last Muslim kingdom in Spain surrendered to Ferdinand and Isabella. Centuries of Islamic rule in Iberia ended. The Christian Reconquista was complete. Celebrations erupted across Spain. Church bells rang. Royal banners fluttered. But for hundreds of thousands of Muslims and Jews, the story unfolded quite differently. Families packed belongings. Some converted under pressure. Others fled. Many crossed the narrow Strait of Gibraltar toward North Africa. Imagine those refugee ships. Not grand naval vessels. Not magnificent merchant fleets. Just overcrowded boats carrying frightened families. Children clutching blankets. Old men carrying books. Women protecting treasured jewelry hidden inside clothing. Everyone looking backward one last time toward homes they would never see again. Many arrived in North Africa carrying grief. Some carried anger. Others carried memories. And among them emerged men determined that Spain would eventually pay for what had been lost. Revenge, history teaches us repeatedly, travels remarkably well by sea. Meanwhile, European kingdoms celebrated expanding maritime power. Portugal explored Africa. Spain crossed the Atlantic. Italian merchants prospered. Venice remained wealthy. Genoa competed fiercely. France entered Mediterranean politics. England slowly increased naval ambitions. Ships multiplied. Trade expanded. So did opportunity. Not merely honest opportunity. The other kind. The profitable kind. The kind involving grappling hooks. At first, coastal raiding remained relatively small scale. A fishing village attacked here. A merchant ship captured there. Nothing especially organized. Nothing yet resembling the great corsair fleets history remembers. Then technology intervened. Ships improved. Cannons became more effective. Navigation advanced. Harbors strengthened. Suddenly, relatively small fleets could project enormous power. One successful raid might capture cargo worth fortunes. Better still, ships themselves became prizes. Experienced sailors became valuable. Passengers became ransom. And healthy young captives? Well, there were markets for them too. Markets Europe preferred not to discuss. Markets North Africa openly embraced. Markets operating across religious boundaries. Because while Christian Europe condemned Muslim slave markets, Christian Europe simultaneously operated slave systems of its own. History rarely offers perfectly innocent participants, only different kinds of guilty. As evening settles over Algiers around the year 1500, the harbor slowly quiets. Fishing boats return first. Their crews unload tuna, sardines, squid. Market sellers shout final bargains. Children chase stray cats through narrow streets. Blacksmiths extinguish glowing forges. The smell of roasted lamb drifts from homes tucked behind whitewashed walls. From the city's mosques comes the haunting call to prayer. It echoes across rooftops, across harbor waters, across anchored ships gently rocking beneath fading sunlight. Somewhere nearby, sailors gather in taverns. Not elegant establishments, simple places. Wooden tables scarred by knives. Clay cups filled with wine were permitted, coffee later, or whatever local drink seemed safest. Stories flow as freely as alcohol. One sailor claims storms nearly destroyed his vessel. Another insists Greek merchants cheated him. Someone swears Venetian captains hide silver beneath false decks. An older mariner quietly mentions rumors. New captains arriving. Experienced fighters. Brothers from the island of Lesbos. Men unusually skilled both at sea and at war. Few people listening realize they're hearing the first whispers of names that will soon terrify Europe. Names that kings will learn. Names that popes will curse. Names still remembered 5 centuries later. Oruk. Heiser. The Barbarossa brothers. Although, as we'll eventually discover, Europe invented part of that legend too. Because history enjoys nicknames almost as much as sailors enjoy exaggeration. And sailors are among humanity's greatest professional storytellers. Mostly because no one can immediately fact-check events that supposedly happened 200 miles offshore during terrible weather. Convenient, really. Before those brothers transform North Africa forever, however, we should linger a little longer in this remarkable world they inherited. Walk slowly through Algiers before dawn. The streets remain cool. Stone walls release yesterday's stored warmth. Donkeys pull carts loaded with vegetables arriving from nearby farms. Bakers have worked since midnight. Fresh bread perfumes entire neighborhoods. Harbor workers prepare ropes. Carpenters inspect hulls. Shipwrights replace cracked planks. Blacksmiths sharpen anchors. Merchants calculate profits before sunrise. Life begins astonishingly early. Ships depend upon daylight. So do fortunes. Stand at the waterfront. Close enough to hear waves slapping gently against wooden piers. Dozens of vessels crowd the harbor. Broad merchant carracks from Europe. Light coastal fishing boats. Swift galleys powered by rows of oars. Heavy transports carrying grain. Some vessels appear weathered. Others freshly painted. Nearly all display scars. Repaired masts. Patched sails. Replaced railings. Life at sea leaves few ships untouched. Experienced captains can read those scars like biographies. Every repaired plank tells a story. Every broken mast once meant terror. Every replaced rudder remembers a storm. Or perhaps, a battle. Because the Mediterranean, despite its beauty, never allowed sailors to forget one uncomfortable truth. You were rarely alone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, someone watched. Someone calculated. Someone wondered whether your cargo might look considerably better aboard their own vessel. And sometimes, they acted upon that thought. The age of the Barbary Pirates was about to begin. Not with a single battle. Not with a declaration. Not even with one famous raid. Instead, like the slow turning of the tide, almost unnoticed. Until suddenly, the entire sea belonged to different masters. The brothers who changed the sea. The Mediterranean wakes slowly. Long before the sun climbs above the eastern horizon, the sea has already begun its quiet work. Waves nudge against harbor walls polished smooth by centuries of tides. Fishing boats drift lazily at anchor, their hulls creaking like old men stretching stiff backs after too little sleep. Somewhere in the darkness, a lantern swings gently from the mast of a merchant vessel preparing to depart before the morning wind changes. If you listen carefully, you can hear the city waking in layers. First come the gulls. then the donkeys pulling carts toward the docks, then the distant call to prayer rolling across white rooftops. Soon afterward arrived the voices of sailors arguing over ropes, cargo, weather, and, because sailors are remarkably consistent across history, whose fault yesterday's problems actually were. The sea, meanwhile, remains perfectly indifferent. It has watched Phoenicians, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Crusaders, and merchants come and go. It knows that kingdoms imagine themselves eternal. The Mediterranean knows better. Empires are temporary. The tide is forever. And somewhere among these harbors, around the closing years of the 15th century, two brothers were preparing to reshape that tide. Their names were Auric and Heiser. Europe would remember them by another name entirely: Barbarossa. Redbeard. Although, as with many famous nicknames, reality was slightly more complicated than the legends preferred. The brothers were born on the island of Lesbos, known to the Ottomans as Midilli. It was an island balanced between worlds. Greek villages overlooked Turkish markets. Orthodox churches stood within sight of Ottoman officials. Merchants from Venice, Genoa, Constantinople, Alexandria, and countless smaller ports all stopped there during their voyages. Languages blended together almost as naturally as sea winds. The brothers themselves grew up in a family that reflected this multicultural world. Their father, Jakob, was likely a Turkish or Albanian soldier who had settled on the island after its Ottoman conquest. Their mother was probably Greek. No one at the time thought this especially remarkable. The Mediterranean had always mixed cultures together. Ports did not ask too many questions if you could repair a sail, bargain over cargo, or steer a ship through dangerous waters. Practical skills mattered far more than neat family trees. As boys, Auric and Heiser learned the sea before they learned politics. They watched fishermen judge weather by clouds no one else noticed. They studied currents flowing invisibly beneath calm surfaces. They learned that the Mediterranean could become violent with astonishing speed. A peaceful morning might become a nightmare by afternoon. Experienced sailors respected the sea. Inexperienced sailors feared it. The foolish ignored both. They generally did not enjoy long careers. The brothers did not begin life as infamous corsairs. Quite the opposite. At first they were merchants. Respectable enough. They carried goods between islands and ports. Textiles. Pottery. Olive oil. Timber. Perhaps spices or grain depending upon the season. Merchant life was hardly glamorous. Days blurred together. Weather dictated schedules. Profits depended upon avoiding storms, taxes, dishonest customers, and competitors who occasionally confused commerce with armed robbery, which happened more often than insurance companies would have appreciated, had insurance companies existed in anything resembling their modern form. The Mediterranean rewarded caution, until it rewarded boldness. One voyage changed everything. Sources differ on the exact details. History often behaves this way. Enough people survive to tell the story that everyone remembers something slightly different. What seems likely is that Auric's ship encountered the Knights Hospitaller. These were no ordinary pirates, nor ordinary monks. They occupied one of history's stranger categories, warrior monks. Men who took religious vows while also becoming remarkably skilled at sinking enemy ships. Because medieval history occasionally sounds like someone kept inventing increasingly improbable occupations. The knights saw Muslim shipping as legitimate targets. Auric's vessel became one of those targets. A fierce battle followed. His younger brother Ilias was killed. Auric himself was captured. Imagine the silence afterward. The smoke drifting away. Broken timbers floating on gentle waves. The realization that one brother lay dead. Another disappeared into captivity. Families all across the Mediterranean experienced moments exactly like this. One battle. One unlucky voyage. Everything changed forever. Captivity in the early 16th century was rarely temporary. Prisoners became valuable property. Some were ransomed. Some worked as laborers. Others disappeared into years of slavery aboard ships or inside households. The Mediterranean possessed slave markets on every side. Christian kingdoms enslaved Muslims. Muslim states enslaved Christians. North Africans captured Europeans. Europeans captured North Africans. Each side insisted its own system possessed moral justification. Each side tended to speak much less enthusiastically when their own people wore chains. History can be painfully symmetrical. Oric eventually escaped, or perhaps he was ransomed. The sources remain uncertain. What matters is that he returned transformed. The merchant was gone. The corsair had arrived. There is something fascinating about the psychology of revenge. Not the dramatic kind shown in novels, the quieter kind. The sort that settles slowly inside a person after unimaginable loss. Oric had watched one brother die. He himself had experienced captivity. The Mediterranean no longer looked like a marketplace. It looked like a battlefield. If others intended to live by the sword, he would simply become better at using one. By the opening years of the 16th century, Oric gathered companions who shared similar experiences. Some had lost families. Others sought fortune. Many simply understood that piracy, or privateering, depending on who issued the paperwork, offered opportunities impossible to ignore. A successful merchant might spend years earning modest profits. A successful corsair might become wealthy after a single voyage. Dangerous? Certainly. Profitable? Sometimes astonishingly so. Young men have always possessed an unfortunate tendency to focus primarily on the second part. The Mediterranean itself encouraged this transformation. Spanish ships carried treasure. Venetian merchants transported luxury goods. Pilgrims crossed between continents. Fishing villages remained lightly defended. Hundreds of islands provided perfect hiding places. A clever captain could disappear almost at will, especially if local rulers appreciated receiving a percentage of captured cargo, which many did. Governments have historically demonstrated remarkable flexibility regarding morality whenever tax revenue becomes involved. Oric proved exceptionally talented, not merely brave. Bravery alone often gets people killed. He possessed judgment. He understood winds. He selected targets carefully. He avoided unnecessary risks. Most importantly, he inspired loyalty. Successful captains required more than swordsmanship. They needed navigators, shipwrights, doctors, interpreters, experienced sailors, reliable officers. A ship functioned less like a weapon and more like a floating village where everyone depended upon everyone else. Poor leadership doomed entire crews. Good leadership created legends. Soon another brother joined him. Heiser, younger, calmer. Patient where Oric was bold. Thoughtful where Oric sometimes rushed ahead. Together they complemented each other remarkably well. One brother excelled during battle. The other excelled during planning. History often remembers individuals. Reality usually rewards partnerships. Imagine standing aboard one of their early galleys. The vessel stretches long and narrow across surprisingly calm water. Rows of oars extend from each side like enormous wooden wings. Above them hangs a triangular lateen sail ready to catch favorable winds. The deck smells of pine tar, salt, sweat, smoke from yesterday's cooking fire, perhaps garlic. Definitely fish. Sailors repair ropes while others sharpen curved swords. A carpenter replaces damaged planking with rhythmic hammer blows. Nearby, someone quietly recites prayers before departure. No one speaks very loudly. Experienced crews understand that nervous energy spreads quickly. Confidence, even borrowed confidence, can become contagious. The captain studies the horizon. He knows merchant vessels should appear sometime after sunrise. If fortune smiles, today may prove profitable. If fortune frowns, someone else may be hunting them instead. Contrary to popular imagination, sea battles were often surprisingly brief. Hours of searching, minutes of violence. A lookout spots distant sails. Signal flags rise. The crew prepares. Weapons distributed. Cannons loaded. Archers ready. Rowers increase their pace. Two ships slowly close the distance. The silence becomes unbearable. Everyone calculates possibilities. Can we outrun them? Should we fight? Are they stronger than they appear? Then comes the first cannon. Smoke erupts. Wood splinters. Men shout. Drums pound. Oars churn violently. Hooks fly across narrowing water. The ships collide. For several frantic minutes, the battle becomes less naval warfare and more organized chaos balanced precariously atop floating timber. Victory often belonged not to the larger crew, but to the one that remained calm longest. The Barbarossa brothers excelled precisely there. Success attracts followers. It also attracts enemies. By 1504, their reputation spread rapidly. Muslim refugees from Spain admired them. Ottoman officials noticed them. European merchants feared them. North African rulers saw opportunity. Because Auric and Heiser offered something priceless. Protection. Or perhaps more accurately, protection purchased through aggressive violence directed at someone else. Political theory frequently sounds more respectable than its practical application. One episode elevated Auric almost overnight. After Spain intensified pressure on Muslims remaining in Iberia, thousands sought escape across the Mediterranean. Many refugee ships lacked protection. Spanish naval patrols intercepted some. Others simply could not find enough vessels. Auric organized rescues, repeatedly crossing dangerous waters, transporting refugees safely to North Africa. To those families, he became more than a corsair. He became a savior. European sources emphasized his piracy. Muslim communities remembered his rescues. Both descriptions contain truth. History depends heavily upon where one happens to be standing. His fame exploded. Across North Africa, stories multiplied. Some exaggerated his victories. Others invented entirely new ones. One rumor claimed he could navigate storms by instinct alone. Another insisted he escaped impossible traps through divine favor. Sailors love myths. The sea encourages them. After all, once someone disappears beyond the horizon, who can confidently say what happened? It was around this period that Europeans increasingly called him Barbarossa, Redbeard. Whether because of his actual beard, reddish hair, or confusion with his brother matters less than the legend itself. The name spread through ports from Sicily to Spain. Mothers warned children. Merchants hired additional guards. Captains scanned every distant sail with fresh anxiety. Fear travels remarkably quickly across commercial networks, sometimes faster than ships themselves. But Auric and Heiser understood something even more important than reputation. Individual ships could only achieve so much. To dominate the Mediterranean, they needed cities, harbors, shipyards, political alliances, safe places to repair vessels, store supplies, recruit crews, sell captured cargo. Power at sea ultimately depended upon power ashore. And one city, glittering beneath the North African sun, would soon offer exactly that opportunity. Algiers. Its ruler faced growing Spanish pressure. Spanish fortresses overlooked nearby waters. European influence expanded steadily. The city's leaders needed experienced naval commanders. The Barbarossa brothers needed a permanent base. History was preparing another partnership, one that would reshape the entire Mediterranean. By the next sunrise, the brothers would no longer be wandering corsairs chasing opportunity across open water. They were about to become something far more dangerous. Builders of a maritime empire. Algiers, the city that became a pirate kingdom. If you could sail toward Algiers on a clear spring morning in the year 1516, you might mistake it for a city entirely at peace. The first thing you would notice would not be its soldiers, nor its walls, nor the cannons peering quietly over stone battlements. It would be the light. The Mediterranean has a peculiar talent for turning white buildings into mirrors. Long before noon, sunlight bounced from plastered walls until the whole city seemed to glow against the green hills behind it. Palm trees leaned lazily in the warm breeze. Fishing boats bobbed gently inside the harbor. Smoke drifted upward from hundreds of breakfast fires. It looked almost impossibly serene. That illusion lasted right up until you noticed the warships. Dozens of them. Some broad and heavy. Others long, narrow, and built for speed. Their oars rested above the water like folded wings waiting to unfold. Men moved constantly between them, carrying barrels of fresh water, coils of rope, sacks of biscuit, bundles of arrows, cannonballs, timber, pitch, and spare sails. Shipwrights hammered away beneath temporary wooden shelters. Blacksmiths showered sparks into the morning air. Sailmakers stitched canvas nearly the size of houses. The harbor sounded like an enormous machine made entirely of wood and muscle. Nothing stood still. Nothing rested for long. Because Algiers had become something extraordinary. Not merely a port. Not merely a fortress. But the beating heart of an entire maritime empire. The city itself had existed for centuries. Phoenicians traded here. Romans governed here. Berber dynasties ruled here. Arab scholars walked these streets long before European kings had ever heard the city's name. Its position was nearly perfect. The coastline curved naturally, creating a sheltered harbor. Nearby hills offered excellent defensive positions. Fresh water could be found inland. Trade routes from the Sahara reached the coast here. Everything a successful city required already existed. The Barbarossa brothers simply recognized what it could become. Sometimes history belongs not to those who build something entirely new, but to those who recognize hidden potential before anyone else. When Hayreddin Barbarossa arrived, Algiers faced a dangerous future. Spain had spent decades expanding its influence along the North African coast. Following the conquest of Granada, Spanish rulers believed controlling Mediterranean ports would protect their own shores from retaliation. One by one, they occupied strategic harbors. Strongholds appeared along the coastline. Fortified islands guarded approaches to major cities. Most threatening of all was a small rocky island sitting just offshore from Algiers. The Spanish had constructed a fortress there, known as the Pennon of Algiers. Its cannons watched every ship entering or leaving the harbor. Imagine living beneath the constant gaze of an enemy fortress. Every fishing boat leaving at dawn could be observed. Every merchant vessel inspected from afar. Every movement quietly recorded. The city was technically independent. In reality, it lived beneath the shadow of Spanish guns. The local ruler knew this could not continue forever. Sooner or later, Spain would tighten its grip, unless someone stronger arrived first. That someone proved to be Hayreddin Barbarossa. At first, the invitation seemed simple enough. Help defend the city. Drive away Spanish influence. Strengthen local defenses. Perfectly reasonable requests. Except history has repeatedly demonstrated that inviting heavily armed military commanders into political disputes occasionally produces unexpected outcomes. The city's rulers soon discovered this unfortunate pattern firsthand. Accounts differ over precisely what happened. Some suggest political intrigue. Others hint at betrayal. Still others describe desperate necessity. Whatever the exact sequence of events, Hayreddin emerged as the new master of Algiers. The previous ruler did not survive. Power had changed hands, and there was no turning back. Now Algiers possessed exactly what the Barbarossa brothers had always needed. A permanent base. Not a temporary anchorage. Not a hidden cove. An actual capital. Shipyards expanded almost immediately. Fortifications improved. New cannons appeared along the harbor walls. Warehouses filled with supplies. Recruitment accelerated. Experienced sailors arrived from across the Mediterranean. Some sought fortune. Others revenge. Many simply preferred serving successful captains. Victory attracts volunteers remarkably efficiently. Walk through the streets with me. Not as a nobleman. Not as an ambassador. Simply as an ordinary traveler. The narrow streets twist unexpectedly between whitewashed buildings. Upper floors lean slightly toward one another, providing welcome shade from the relentless African sun. Cats patrol every corner with supreme confidence, as cats have done in Mediterranean ports for thousands of years. Children chase one another through marketplaces. Women bargain over vegetables freshly delivered from nearby farms. A storyteller gathers listeners beneath an archway. Fresh bread. Olive oil. Leather. Fish. Spices arriving from distant caravan routes. Charcoal smoke. Citrus fruit. Sea salt. Occasionally something less pleasant. Large medieval cities were magnificent. They were also magnificently unhygienic. Romantic paintings rarely include that particular detail. Near the harbor, the atmosphere changes. Here the crowds become rougher. Languages multiply. Arabic mingles with Turkish, Greek, Spanish, Italian, Berber dialects. French, Portuguese, Hebrew. Sometimes all within the same conversation. A sailor swears in 3 different languages before breakfast. No one seems especially surprised. The Mediterranean was perhaps the world's greatest classroom for multilingual insults. Commerce practically required them. The docks never truly slept. At sunrise, merchant cargo arrived. By noon, prisoners might be unloaded from captured ships. Toward evening, damaged vessels returned for repairs. Throughout the night, blacksmiths continued working by torchlight. Shipbuilding consumed enormous quantities of resources: timber, iron, canvas, pitch, tar, rope, food, fresh water. Everything had to be constantly replenished. Maintaining a fleet often proved more difficult than winning battles. Victory could be achieved in an afternoon. Keeping ships seaworthy required endless labor. Auric understood logistics. Many famous commanders throughout history have loved dramatic battles. Far fewer appreciated the quiet importance of supply chains. Without food, no sailors. Without timber, no ships. Without rope, no sails. Without fresh water, no voyages. Empire, rather disappointingly, often depended more upon warehouse management than heroic speeches. The city's economy changed rapidly. Merchants prospered. Carpenters found endless work. Rope makers expanded their workshops. Blacksmiths rarely rested. Even bakers benefited. Thousands of sailors require astonishing amounts of bread. Entire neighborhoods specialized in supporting the fleet. The pirate kingdom became an industrial machine. Every successful raid echoed back through dozens of ordinary professions. A captured merchant vessel might enrich not only its crew, but also the cooper who built water barrels, the widow renting rooms to sailors, the farmer growing wheat, the child carrying messages between warehouses. War has always employed far more people than battlefields alone suggest. Of course, not everyone celebrated, because every victorious corsair eventually returned with something besides cargo. Captives. Sometimes a handful, sometimes hundreds. Imagine standing near the docks as one such ship arrives. The victorious crew shouts with excitement. Their clothes are stained with salt and smoke. Some bear fresh wounds wrapped hurriedly in cloth. Behind them stand frightened prisoners. Merchants, fishermen, pilgrims, soldiers, women, children. Their expressions reveal exhaustion more than panic. Most have not yet fully understood what has happened. Many still expect release after negotiations. Some will indeed be ransomed. Others will spend years waiting. A few will never return home. The Mediterranean slave trade touched nearly every coastline. For 3 centuries, perhaps over 1 million Europeans experienced captivity in North Africa. Thousands of Muslims experienced similar fates in Christian lands. Slavery ignored national borders with depressing efficiency. Freedom often depended entirely upon which ship reached you first. Inside Algiers, ransom became an industry. Letters traveled across Europe requesting payment. Religious orders collected donations to free captives. Families sold farms. Churches organized collections. Governments negotiated. Sometimes wealthy prisoners returned home after months. Poorer captives often remained for decades. Money determined destiny with remarkable honesty. Not every captive endured identical treatment. Skilled craftsmen might work in workshops. Educated prisoners occasionally served as translators. Some entered wealthy households. Others labored at construction projects. The strongest men frequently found themselves chained to oars aboard galleys. Perhaps the most feared assignment of all. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine that bench. Hardwood beneath you. An iron chain around one ankle. 40 men seated in a single row, each gripping an enormous oar. The air already hot before sunrise. A bosun raises his whip, not always to punish. Sometimes simply to maintain rhythm. A drum begins beating. Slowly. Steadily. The first stroke feels manageable. The 100th becomes exhausting. The 1000th almost unbearable. Hour after hour, day after day. Storm or sunshine, battle or calm. The oars never stop. For many galley slaves, the sea became something they no longer admired, only endured. Yet history, as always, refuses simple categories. Some captives converted to Islam. Some gained freedom. A few even joined corsair crews voluntarily. Several rose to positions of considerable authority. Identity within the Mediterranean often proved remarkably fluid. Religion mattered enormously. So did survival. Faced with impossible choices, people adapted. Human beings almost always do. Meanwhile, Auric's fame continued spreading. European maps increasingly marked Algiers as a place to avoid. Merchants sailed in convoys whenever possible. Insurance costs rose. Coastal villages strengthened watchtowers. Church bells developed a second purpose. Not merely calling worshippers, but warning of approaching sails. Fear became part of everyday life. Imagine living in a small fishing village along the coast of southern Italy, or Sicily, or Spain, or Sardinia. You wake before dawn. Check the horizon before taking your boat to sea. Not because of weather. Because of pirates. Every distant sail demands attention. Every unfamiliar ship raises questions. Is it a trader? A fisherman? A warship? Or something worse? Living with constant uncertainty changes people. Children learn caution early. Fishermen remain within sight of shore. Families sleep lightly. Dogs bark at every unusual sound. The sea that provides life also threatens to steal it. But Hayreddin Barbarossa would not enjoy his growing power for long. History often grants remarkable people surprisingly little time. In 1518, Spanish forces launched a major campaign. They intended to crush Algiers, destroy the Corsairs, restore their influence. Hayreddin marched inland with his forces. The campaign became disastrous. Surrounded during fierce fighting near Tlemcen, he refused surrender. Accounts describe him fighting until the very end, sword in hand, outnumbered, bleeding, determined. Eventually, he fell. One of the Mediterranean's most feared captains was dead. Europe celebrated. Church bells rang in some cities. Surely the Corsair kingdom would collapse now. Surely Algiers would return to weakness. Surely the pirate menace had ended. It seemed like a reasonable conclusion. There was only one problem. Hayreddin had a younger brother. One who had quietly learned everything. One who possessed equal intelligence. Perhaps even greater patience. A man named Hayreddin. Soon to receive a new name from the Ottoman Sultan himself. Hayreddin. The goodness of the faith. And under his leadership, the Barbary Corsairs would become more powerful than ever before. The age of scattered pirates was ending. The age of an organized naval empire had only just begun. Hayreddin Barbarossa, admiral of an empire. The sea has a peculiar way of forgetting. A battle may rage across its surface in the morning. Cannon smoke hanging low over the water, splintered masts drifting between the waves, cries echoing from ship to ship, and by evening, the Mediterranean appears almost untouched. The tide carries away broken planks. The wind scatters the smoke. The gulls return. Only the people remember. Perhaps that is why sailors have always respected the sea while refusing to trust it. It keeps no memorials, no monuments, only silence. When Hayreddin Barbarossa died in 1518, many people believed that silence had finally settled over the Corsairs of Algiers. Spanish commanders congratulated one another. European merchants cautiously imagined safer voyages. Some coastal villages allowed themselves the luxury of sleeping a little more peacefully. History, however, delights in premature celebrations. Because Hayreddin's younger brother was still alive. And unlike Hayreddin, whose courage often burned as brightly as wildfire, Hayreddin possessed something even more dangerous. Patience. If Hayreddin had been the sword, Hayreddin became the hand that learned exactly when to strike. He was not the loudest man in a room. He did not chase glory for its own sake. He watched, listened, calculated. The Mediterranean was changing rapidly, and he understood something that many captains still refused to accept. No pirate, however successful, could survive forever without the protection of a great power. Independent corsairs might become rich. Empires became permanent, or at least permanent by the generous standards of history. So Hayreddin made a decision that would alter the balance of power across the entire Mediterranean. He formally placed Algiers under the protection of the Ottoman Empire. To modern ears, this may sound like surrender. In reality, it was an astonishingly clever bargain. The Ottomans gained a strategic port in the western Mediterranean. Hayreddin gained legitimacy, soldiers, cannons, shipbuilders, supplies, and the backing of one of the most powerful empires on earth. Both sides won. Diplomacy often succeeds where swords cannot, although having plenty of swords nearby usually helps diplomacy proceed rather smoothly. At that moment, the Ottoman Empire was experiencing what historians often call its golden age. From Constantinople, the empire stretched across southeastern Europe, Anatolia, the Levant, Egypt, much of North Africa, and deep into the Middle East. Its armies marched across continents. Its scholars filled magnificent libraries. Its architects raised breathtaking mosques whose domes still dominate skylines today. Its bureaucracy reached into provinces thousands of miles apart. And perhaps most importantly for our story, its navy was growing stronger every year. The Mediterranean was no longer merely a sea separating nations. It had become the frontier between two enormous worlds. To the west stood the Habsburg Empire under Charles V. To the east stood the Ottoman Empire under Sultan Suleiman. Between them lay islands, ports, trade routes, and endless opportunities for conflict. Sultan Suleiman would later become known in Europe as Suleiman the Magnificent. Within the Ottoman world, he was remembered as Suleiman the Lawgiver. Both titles reveal something important. Great rulers rarely spend all their time fighting. Empires require laws as much as armies. Taxes, roads, ports, markets, shipyards, paperwork. An astonishing quantity of paperwork. History often remembers kings charging into battle. Far fewer paintings depict exhausted government clerks arguing over shipping permits. Yet without those clerks, the armies rarely reached the battlefield. Hayreddin understood bureaucracy surprisingly well. He knew that imperial recognition transformed everything. No longer merely a corsair captain, he became an official servant of the Ottoman state. The Sultan even granted him a new name, Hayreddin, meaning, roughly, goodness of the faith. It was both an honor and a declaration. This was no longer a freelance raider. This was now an admiral serving an empire. Europe noticed immediately and became considerably more nervous. Imagine arriving in Algiers around this time. The city feels different now. Larger, busier, more confident. New construction echoes from every district. Stone masons expand the walls. Engineers strengthen the harbor. Fresh cannon batteries overlook the sea. Warehouses multiply. Government officials arrive carrying imperial documents bearing the Sultan's seal. Military officers inspect defenses. Tax collectors, naturally, appear not far behind. Empires have always traveled with tax collectors. It is one of history's most dependable traditions. The harbor itself has become astonishingly crowded. Merchant ships unload grain from Egypt. Timber arrives from Anatolia. Iron comes from distant provinces. Caravans bring leather, wax, ivory, spices, and gold across the Sahara. Captured prizes occupy separate docks, while officials carefully record their value. Nothing is left to chance. Even piracy, once fully organized, develops accounting departments. Somewhere, inevitably, someone is calculating percentages. Hayreddin invests heavily in ships, not simply replacing old vessels, improving them. The Mediterranean galley has already proven itself an effective weapon, long and narrow, powered by both sail and oars, fast enough to chase merchant vessels, agile enough to maneuver during battle. Yet shipbuilders continue experimenting. Hull designs improve. Cannons become lighter. Rigging becomes more efficient. Every small improvement offers a tiny advantage. And at sea, tiny advantages often determine who survives. Shipbuilding is one of the marvels of the 16th century. Stand inside one of Algiers' shipyards. The smell strikes you first. fresh-cut pine, oak, tar bubbling inside iron cauldrons, hot sawdust, salt carried inland by the breeze. The noise follows immediately afterward. Axes chopping, hammers pounding, saws biting rhythmically through enormous logs, men shouting measurements, children carrying tools nearly larger than themselves. Master craftsmen inspect every beam with astonishing care. A single flaw hidden inside the wrong piece of timber might doom an entire ship during the next storm. No one wishes to discover poor craftsmanship halfway through a battle. Nearby, rope makers twist endless strands of hemp. The finished ropes stretch astonishing distances, some thicker than a man's arm, others delicate enough for intricate rigging. Everything aboard a ship depends upon rope. Anchors, sails, cargo, cannons, even prisoners. The age of sail was, in many ways, also the age of rope. An empire literally held together by carefully twisted fibers. Life aboard Hayreddin's ships remained difficult. Romantic paintings often show heroic captains standing proudly at the bow. Reality smelled considerably worse. Fresh water spoiled quickly. Food consisted mainly of hard biscuit, dried beans, onions, olives, salted meat when available, and fish whenever fortune cooperated. Rats became permanent passengers. So did fleas. Sleep arrived in short, uncomfortable intervals. Storms soaked everything. Summer heat turned the deck into an oven. Winter winds sliced through damp clothing. The Mediterranean may appear gentle compared to the Atlantic. It never stopped demanding respect. Every morning began before sunrise. Lookouts climbed the mast. The cook attempted breakfast using ingredients that had somehow survived weeks at sea. Sailors inspected rigging. Carpenters searched for leaks. The captain checked wind direction. The imam might lead prayers. The physician, if one was aboard, examined yesterday's injuries. Routine became survival. Experienced crews trusted routine more than luck. And then there were the rowers. Many were slaves. Others criminals. Some free men hired for wages. Popular imagination often assumes every galley rower wore chains. Reality was more complicated. Military galleys increasingly relied upon trained professionals because experienced rowers simply performed better during battle. Still, enslaved men remained a common sight aboard many vessels. The rhythm of the oars became the heartbeat of the ship. One stroke, then another. Hour after hour. The drum kept time. The sea kept secrets. Hayreddin's crews reflected the remarkable diversity of the Mediterranean. Turks, Berbers, Arabs, Greeks, Albanians, converted Europeans, former prisoners, experienced Andalusian refugees, even adventurers whose original homeland hardly mattered anymore. At sea, competence outweighed ancestry. If you could climb rigging during a storm, aim a cannon accurately, navigate by stars, or repair a damaged mast before the ship sank, no one cared very much where you had been born. Survival creates surprisingly practical societies. News traveled constantly. A Venetian merchant spotted leaving Crete. Spanish treasure departing Naples. A convoy sailing toward Sicily. Pilgrims crossing from Italy. Information became as valuable as gold. Spies appeared everywhere. Harbor workers listened carefully. Innkeepers overheard conversations. Merchants quietly exchanged rumors. Fishermen noticed unfamiliar sails. The Mediterranean functioned almost like an enormous web. Every port connected to another. Every conversation potentially profitable. Long before telegraphs or radios, information crossed the sea with astonishing speed. Mostly because people simply could not resist sharing gossip. Human nature once again proving wonderfully reliable. Hayreddin excelled at using that information. Unlike reckless captains who chased every possible prize, he selected targets strategically. Merchant ships carrying valuable cargo. Enemy warships isolated from larger fleets. Poorly defended islands. He understood that fear itself could become a weapon. If merchants believed no voyage was safe, trade slowed. Insurance costs rose. Governments diverted resources toward naval escorts. An enemy forced constantly onto the defensive gradually exhausted itself. Sometimes the greatest victory occurred without firing a cannon. Meanwhile, Charles V watched events unfold with growing concern. As Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain, he ruled an empire stretching across Europe and into the Americas. Gold flowed from the New World. Spanish armies remained among the finest in Europe. Yet despite all this wealth, the Mediterranean refused to become secure. Every year brought fresh reports. Merchant vessels missing. Coastal villages raided. Prisoners carried away. Spanish governors demanded reinforcements. Italian allies requested protection. The Barbary Corsairs had evolved beyond ordinary piracy. They had become instruments of Ottoman strategy. Europe faced not merely raiders, but an organized naval system. And at the center of that system stood Hayreddin Barbarossa, older now, more experienced, his famous red beard streaked with gray, his reputation stretching from Gibraltar to Constantinople. Kings cursed his name. Sultans praised his victories. Sailors told impossible stories about his exploits. Some claimed he could predict storms days in advance. Others insisted he escaped impossible blockades by sailing through darkness no sane captain would enter. Like all great legends, truth and exaggeration blended together until separating them became almost impossible. Hayreddin probably smiled at many of those stories. Fear, after all, costs nothing to cultivate. Soon, Sultan Suleiman would summon him east, not as a mere corsair, not even simply as governor of Algiers, but as the commander of the entire Ottoman fleet. The empire had recognized what the Mediterranean already knew. The finest admiral of his generation no longer belonged solely to North Africa. He belonged to history. And before long, he would meet the greatest naval powers of Europe in battles that would decide who truly ruled the Mediterranean Sea. The Sultan's admiral. There is a particular kind of silence that exists only at sea. It arrives just before sunrise, when the stars have begun to fade but the sun has not yet announced itself. The wind grows gentle. The waves seem to breathe instead of crash. Hundreds of men aboard dozens of ships awaken quietly, careful not to disturb whatever fragile peace the morning has offered. Somewhere, a sailor rubs sleep from his eyes before climbing the rigging. A cook rekindles last night's embers. An officer studies the horizon through narrowing eyes. Far overhead, seabirds circle patiently, already convinced they know where breakfast will appear. The fleet waits, not nervously, simply patiently. Because sailors understand something that armies marching across land often forget. At sea, nature always commands first. In the year 1533, Hayreddin Barbarossa left Algiers and sailed east toward Constantinople. It was not a retreat, nor an exile. Quite the opposite. It was perhaps the greatest promotion any corsair could have imagined. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent had summoned him personally. By now, Hayreddin's victories had become impossible to ignore. Merchant convoys avoided entire sections of the Mediterranean because his ships were rumored to patrol there. Spanish governors repeatedly requested reinforcements. Venetian diplomats complained almost constantly. Even the Pope received regular reports mentioning the same troublesome name, Barbarossa. To Europeans, it was a warning. To the Ottoman court, it sounded remarkably like a resume. Imagine approaching Constantinople from the sea. Even after centuries, few cities inspired such awe. Its skyline rose above the Bosporus like something half-imagined. Great domes shimmered beneath sunlight. Minarets reached toward the sky. Massive stone walls stretched for miles, defending the city that had once been the capital of the Roman Empire and was now the beating heart of the Ottoman world. Hundreds of ships crowded its harbors. Merchant vessels from Venice, grain ships from Egypt, fishing boats from the Black Sea, war galleys with polished bronze cannons, tiny ferries carrying passengers across the strait. The city did not merely connect continents. It connected worlds. Hayreddin had seen many ports, none compared to this. At the imperial palace, ceremony governed everything. Visitors waited according to rank. Officials moved with practiced precision. Scribes recorded every audience. Guards stood motionless despite the summer heat. Nothing happened accidentally. Empires thrive on ritual. It reassures everyone that someone, somewhere, is in control, even if history later proves otherwise. When Hayreddin finally stood before Suleiman, two extraordinary men met face to face. One ruled an empire stretching across 3 continents. The other ruled the sea that connected them. Suleiman recognized talent immediately. Instead of treating Hayreddin merely as a useful corsair, he appointed him Capadon Pasha, Grand Admiral, commander of the Ottoman Navy, the highest naval office in the empire. It was an astonishing rise. The son of a modest family from Lesbos had become the supreme commander of one of the world's greatest fleets, not through noble birth, not through inheritance, but through experience. In an age obsessed with aristocracy, the sea occasionally rewarded competence instead. With his appointment came enormous responsibility. The Ottoman fleet was no collection of adventurous pirates. It was a massive military institution. Dozens of warships, thousands of sailors, marines, engineers, shipbuilders, quartermasters, doctors, clerks, blacksmiths, carpenters, cooks. The logistics alone would have terrified many commanders. Hayreddin seemed almost energized by it. Years spent organizing Algiers had prepared him well. He understood that discipline won campaigns long before battles began. One of his first priorities was expanding the imperial arsenal. The shipyards along the Golden Horn became some of the busiest in Europe. Stand there for a moment. The noise never truly stops. Sawyers cut enormous oak beams into carefully measured lengths. Teams of oxen drag timber across muddy ground. Children carry buckets of pitch. Master shipwrights shout instructions from wooden scaffolding. Iron nails cool inside barrels of water with sharp hissing sounds. Everywhere, ships are being born. Some still exist only as enormous ribs rising from wooden frames. Others already possess decks, masts, and carved figureheads waiting for paint. The smell is unforgettable. Fresh timber, hot tar, charcoal smoke, sea salt drifting inland. It is the scent of empire under construction. Hayreddin personally inspected many of these vessels. He knew every design possessed strengths and weaknesses. A galley built for speed sacrificed cargo space. A heavier ship could mount more cannons but turn more slowly. Everything involved compromise. Commanders who ignored those compromises usually discovered them during battle, which was considerably less convenient. Training became equally important. A warship is only as effective as the people aboard it. New recruits learned knotwork until their fingers bled. Rowers practiced maintaining rhythm for hours. Cannoneers drilled relentlessly. Archers trained despite the growing importance of firearms. Marines rehearsed boarding actions with wooden practice weapons. Officers studied charts and currents. Failure during training meant embarrassment. Failure during combat meant death. The distinction encouraged careful attention. Hayreddin also understood morale. Life at sea demanded more than discipline. It required trust. A sailor climbing 50 feet above the deck during a storm trusted the man holding the safety line. Rowers trusted the helmsman. Cannoneers trusted powder handlers. Everyone depended upon everyone else. An experienced crew functioned almost like a single organism. Every movement anticipated. Every command understood before it was fully spoken. Watching such a crew work could seem almost effortless. It never was. Perfection required endless repetition. Meanwhile, across Europe, rulers watched Ottoman naval expansion with growing unease. Venice had dominated Mediterranean commerce for generations. Spain possessed immense wealth from the Americas. Genoa remained an important maritime republic. The Knights Hospitaller continued defending Christian shipping from their fortress on Malta. Each possessed impressive fleets. Yet none could ignore the increasingly capable Ottoman navy, especially now that it was commanded by Hayreddin Barbarossa. The corsair had become a strategist, and strategists tend to be far more troublesome than raiders. In 1534, Hayreddin launched one of his boldest campaigns. His target was Tunis. The city occupied an extraordinarily valuable position along the North African coast. Whoever controlled Tunis influenced trade across much of the central Mediterranean. Capturing it would strengthen Ottoman influence enormously. The campaign moved swiftly. Local politics proved complicated. Alliances shifted rapidly. Some leaders welcomed Ottoman support. Others resisted. Such was the nature of 16th century diplomacy. Today's ally frequently became tomorrow's enemy, usually before lunch. Hayreddin succeeded. Tunis fell under Ottoman control. The victory sent shockwaves through Europe. Now, instead of merely threatening merchant shipping, the Ottomans controlled yet another strategic harbor. The Mediterranean seemed to be slipping steadily from Christian hands. Panic spread through royal courts. Letters crossed Europe with astonishing urgency. Something had to be done. Charles V decided to act personally. Unlike many monarchs content to issue commands from distant palaces, Charles frequently led military campaigns himself. He assembled one of the largest expeditions Europe had seen in decades. Hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of soldiers, knights, mercenaries, Spanish veterans, Italian contingents, German troops, Portuguese sailors. Supplies enough to feed an entire moving city. The objective was simple: retake Tunis, destroy Hayreddin's influence, restore Christian dominance. Simple objectives often become remarkably complicated once reality becomes involved. The expedition arrived in 1535. The scale was overwhelming. Imagine standing atop Tunis's walls as the horizon slowly fills with sails. Not dozens, hundreds. White canvas stretching almost beyond sight. The sea itself seems transformed into a floating forest. Drums echo across the water. Trumpets answer from distant decks. The sunlight flashes endlessly from polished helmets and spearheads. For defenders watching from shore, it must have appeared almost apocalyptic. Even experienced veterans reportedly fell silent. The siege proved brutal. Cannons pounded ancient walls day after day. Smoke covered the city. Food grew scarce. Water became precious. Disease spread among soldiers packed into overcrowded camps. Victory, when it finally came, carried a terrible cost. Charles succeeded in retaking Tunis. Hayreddin escaped with many of his ships, but the city suffered enormously. Thousands died. Many more were enslaved. Victorious armies throughout history have rarely displayed much restraint once walls finally fall. This campaign proved no exception. From Europe's perspective, the expedition was a triumph. Charles V returned celebrated as a defender of Christendom. Artists painted magnificent scenes of victory. Poets praised his courage. Court historians described glorious conquest. History written by winners often possesses remarkable optimism. The civilians living through those victories usually remembered rather different details. Hayreddin, meanwhile, remained alive. And perhaps more importantly, his fleet remained largely intact. He understood an uncomfortable military truth. Cities could be rebuilt. Ships could be repaired. Experienced crews could not easily be replaced. He had preserved what mattered most. The war was far from over. As autumn settled across the Mediterranean, Hayreddin resumed operations almost immediately. Merchant vessels vanished once more. Coastal raids resumed. Ottoman influence continued expanding. European celebrations faded into renewed frustration. It sometimes seemed impossible to keep the Corsairs down for long. Like the tide itself, they simply kept returning. Far to the west, fishermen along the coast of Spain still climbed watchtowers every morning. Italian villages still rang church bells whenever unfamiliar sails appeared. Parents still warned children not to wander too close to lonely beaches. The fear had become part of daily life. Not constant panic. Something quieter. More familiar. Like living beside an active volcano. Most days nothing happened. Yet everyone knew what was possible. Hayreddin himself was growing older. His beard now almost completely gray. His face marked by years beneath relentless sun and sea wind. Scars crossed his hands. His movements had become slower. His mind, however, seemed sharper than ever. Experience had replaced youthful recklessness. He no longer needed to prove his bravery. Instead, he focused on proving something far more valuable: his judgment. And soon, that judgment would be tested in the greatest naval confrontation of the 16th century. A battle that would decide who truly ruled the Mediterranean. A battle fought not merely for treasure or glory, but for the future of an entire sea. The Battle of Preveza awaited, and history would remember it for centuries. Preveza, the day the Mediterranean chose its master. The sea never announces that history is about to happen. It does not darken dramatically. The wind does not whisper prophecies through the rigging. The gulls continue searching for fish with complete indifference. To nature, the greatest battle in human history is simply another morning. On the morning of September 28, 1538, the waters near the Gulf of Arda, on the western coast of Greece, looked almost peaceful. The sky was clear. The autumn air carried just enough coolness to make the coming afternoon pleasant rather than oppressive. The mountains stood quietly in the distance, their slopes fading into a pale blue haze. Small fishing villages clung to the shoreline as they had for generations. Olive groves shimmered under the rising sun. If you had wandered down to the beach that morning without looking toward the horizon, you might have believed nothing unusual was happening at all. But the horizon told another story. It was covered with sails. Hundreds of them. The largest naval confrontation the Mediterranean had witnessed in generations was about to begin. And almost everyone involved believed the fate of the sea itself was hanging in the balance. To understand why this battle mattered so much, we need to step back for just a moment. Hayreddin Barbarossa had become more than a successful admiral. His victories had transformed Ottoman influence across the Mediterranean. Merchant routes had shifted. European ports demanded larger garrisons. Spanish governors requested reinforcements almost yearly. Venice, the proud maritime republic whose fortunes depended entirely upon safe commerce, watched its trade suffer. Meanwhile, Pope Paul III reached a conclusion shared by many European rulers. One nation alone could not defeat Barbarossa. Perhaps all of them together could. It was an ambitious idea. History has always loved coalitions. History has also noticed that coalitions tend to argue with themselves almost as enthusiastically as they argue with their enemies. Still, the effort was impressive. Spain contributed ships. Venice sent experienced sailors. The Papal States joined. Genoa participated. The Knights of Malta offered support. Other Italian states added vessels. Together they formed what became known as the Holy League. On paper, it was overwhelming. More ships, more soldiers, more cannons, more money. Everything suggested victory should be inevitable. History, unfortunately, has never been especially interested in mathematics. The commander chosen to lead this enormous fleet was Andrea Doria, one of the greatest admirals of his age, an experienced Genoese sailor who had spent decades mastering Mediterranean warfare. Even Hayreddin respected him. Both men understood the sea. Both had survived countless campaigns. Neither underestimated the other. That mutual respect would shape everything that followed. Imagine standing aboard Doria's flagship. The deck gleams from constant maintenance. The sails snap confidently in the morning breeze. Officers consult detailed charts spread across heavy wooden tables. Signal flags wait neatly folded. Cannons line the gunwales in disciplined rows. The crew moves efficiently. No wasted motion. No unnecessary shouting. This is not a pirate vessel. It is the flagship of a professional coalition fleet assembled from the greatest naval powers in Christian Europe. Confidence fills the air. Some sailors whisper that the Ottomans will flee rather than fight. Others laugh. A few veterans remain wisely silent. Experienced sailors rarely predict victory too loudly. The sea has a habit of punishing arrogance. Now drift several miles away, toward Hayreddin's fleet. The atmosphere feels different, less ceremonial, more relaxed, not because the danger is smaller, because the crews have spent years together. Many sailors know one another by name. Some fought beside Hayreddin since the days of Algiers. Others joined after campaigns in Tunis or the Aegean. There is conversation. Occasional laughter. A cook complains about running low on onions. Someone else argues about the weather. A young sailor quietly sharpens his sword for perhaps the 5th time that morning. Nearby, an older veteran notices. He smiles gently. No sword was ever sharpened enough to replace a calm mind. The young man nods. He is not entirely convinced. Experience generally arrives after it would have been most useful. Hayreddin walks slowly across the deck. He is nearing 70. An extraordinary age for someone who has spent most of his life at sea. His beard is now almost entirely white. Only traces of its famous reddish color remain. The younger sailors still call him Barbarossa. The nickname has outlived the beard itself. His movements are slower than they once were. His eyes are not. They study the coastline carefully. The currents. The two fleets could not have been more different. The Holy League possessed perhaps 300 ships. Hayreddin commanded roughly 120. The Europeans enjoyed numerical superiority. Many officers assumed that alone guaranteed success. Hayreddin knew numbers mattered. He also knew something else. Not every ship can fight at once. Not every captain agrees with every order. Not every fleet functions as one fleet simply because someone says it does. Unity is far more difficult than counting vessels. The geography favored Hayreddin. The narrow waters near Preveza limited the maneuverability of larger fleets. Strong coastal currents complicated navigation. Hidden sandbars threatened careless captains. The Ottoman admiral had studied these waters carefully. Doria had not. Sometimes preparation quietly defeats superiority. Morning sunlight reflected brilliantly from hundreds of oars dipping into the sea. Drums echoed across the water. Flag signals flashed between ships. Trumpets answered. The battle had begun. Yet unlike dramatic paintings, naval battles rarely opened with immediate chaos. Instead, everything unfolded slowly, almost cautiously. Each commander tested the other. Small movements, tiny adjustments. A ship drifting slightly forward, another pulling back. Hours could pass before decisive action. Battles between experienced admirals often resembled chess far more than sword fights. Every move invited a response. Every mistake became permanent. Hayreddin waited. That may sound simple. It wasn't. Doing nothing at precisely the right moment is one of the hardest skills any commander can master. Younger officers urged attack. The enemy seemed vulnerable. The opportunity appeared obvious. Hayreddin refused. He continued watching. Wind direction shifted gradually. The afternoon breeze strengthened exactly as he had expected. Only then did he move. Ottoman galleys surged forward together. Not recklessly. Precisely. Like a single machine. The oars bit into the water. Cannons roared. Smoke rolled across the sea. Arrows darkened the sky. Boarding parties prepared grappling hooks. The Mediterranean suddenly exploded into noise. Wood splintered. Men shouted orders impossible to hear above the thunder of artillery. Flags disappeared behind drifting powder smoke. Ships collided. Or shattered. Broken masts crashed into the sea. The smell of salt mixed with burning gunpowder and fresh-cut timber. History was no longer unfolding quietly. It was screaming. Andrea Doria faced an impossible decision. His fleet was larger. But coordinating hundreds of ships under battle conditions proved extraordinarily difficult. Signals became confused. Visibility vanished inside cannon smoke. Different national contingents interpreted orders differently. Some captains hesitated. Others advanced too quickly. The coalition that looked so powerful on paper began behaving like exactly what it was. Several fleets temporarily cooperating. Hayreddin's forces, by contrast, had trained together for years. They reacted instinctively, without confusion, without debate. Experience compensated for numbers. One by one, Ottoman attacks isolated portions of the Holy League. Individual ships found themselves unsupported. Others drifted too far apart. Communication collapsed. Momentum shifted. Doria recognized the danger immediately. He attempted to reorganize. But every adjustment arrived moments too late. The initiative now belonged entirely to Hayreddin. Imagine being an ordinary sailor caught in the middle. You cannot see the entire battle. Only fragments. Smoke. Broken rigging. A nearby ship catching fire. Someone shouting in Italian. Another voice answering in Turkish. The drumbeat urging rowers faster. The sickening crash as two galleys strike side by side. Your entire universe has shrunk to perhaps 50 yards of violent confusion. Only later will historians describe grand strategy. At the time, You were simply trying to survive until sunset. By late afternoon, the outcome had become unavoidable. The Holy League withdrew. Many ships escaped. Others did not. The Ottomans emerged victorious. Remarkably, Hayreddin had not lost a single galley. It was one of the greatest tactical victories in naval history. Not because the enemy had been annihilated, but because a smaller, better-led fleet had defeated a much larger coalition through superior planning, discipline, and patience. It was a masterpiece. Even opponents privately admitted as much. The consequences echoed across Europe. Venice soon sought peace. Merchant captains adjusted their routes once again. Spanish officials strengthened coastal defenses. The Ottoman Empire effectively dominated the eastern and central Mediterranean for decades afterward. No single battle decides history forever, but some battles determine who writes the next chapter. Preveza was one of them. That evening, after the fighting finally ended, silence slowly returned. The smoke drifted away. Broken timbers floated gently across calm water. Survivors searched for friends. Carpenters immediately began repairing damaged hulls. Doctors stitched wounds beneath lantern light. Prayers rose from both fleets. Some in Arabic, some in Latin. Some whispered, some spoken aloud. Victory and defeat sound remarkably similar after sunset. Both include exhaustion. Both include grief. Both include names called into the darkness with no answer. Hayreddin stood quietly aboard his flagship. No dramatic speech survives. No triumphant declaration. Perhaps none was needed. He had spent nearly 40 years mastering the Mediterranean. From merchant, to corsair, to governor, to admiral. Now, he had defeated the greatest coalition Europe could assemble. The sea that had shaped his entire life seemed strangely peaceful once more, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But every merchant captain, every fisherman, every king, every coastal village would soon learn the news. The Mediterranean had chosen its master. For now. Because history never allows anyone to rule forever. And even Hayreddin Barbarossa, the most feared admiral of his age, could not command the sea forever. Time, unlike any fleet, never loses a battle. The golden age of the Corsairs. Victory has a peculiar sound. It is not always the roar of cheering crowds or the blast of trumpets. More often, it sounds like ordinary life quietly continuing. Shipwrights return to work. Merchants begin calculating profits again. Children chase one another through narrow streets. Fishermen mend their nets. Bakers wake long before dawn. The world simply goes on. Yet beneath that familiar rhythm, everything has changed. That was the Mediterranean after Preveza. No king formally announced that the sea now belonged to the Ottoman Empire and its Barbary Corsairs. No treaty declared it. No ceremony marked the occasion. Instead, captains adjusted their routes. Merchants purchased larger escorts. Coastal watchtowers remained occupied throughout the year. The changes were subtle, but everyone who earned a living from the sea understood them. The balance of power had shifted, and for the next several decades, the Barbary Corsairs would enjoy what historians now call their golden age. If you arrived in Algiers around the middle of the 16th century, you would have encountered one of the busiest ports in the world. From sunrise until well after sunset, the harbor remained alive with movement. Merchant vessels from Alexandria unloaded grain. Ships from the Ottoman heartlands brought soldiers and supplies. North African traders arrived with leather, wax, ivory, ostrich feathers, and gold carried across the Sahara by camel caravans. European merchants, despite publicly condemning the Corsairs whenever possible, continued doing business whenever profit outweighed principle. Trade has always possessed an extraordinary ability to ignore politics. Even bitter enemies occasionally become excellent customers, especially when money is involved. The harbor itself resembled a living creature. Winches creaked. Anchors splashed into the water. Dockworkers shouted measurements in half a dozen languages. Blacksmiths hammered glowing iron into anchors, hinges, nails, and cannon fittings. Coopers rolled fresh barrels toward waiting ships. The scent of fresh timber mixed with pitch, smoke, spices, fish, sweat, and the ever-present salt carried inland by the sea breeze. Above it all, gulls circled endlessly. Patient. Loud. Completely convinced that every human endeavor ultimately existed to produce discarded fish. Their confidence was admirable. At first glance, Algiers seemed wealthy. At second glance, it seemed even wealthier. Grand houses rose behind high white walls. Mosques expanded. Public fountains provided fresh water. Markets overflowed with goods from 3 continents. Gold coins changed hands almost constantly. Much of that wealth came from perfectly respectable commerce. Some of it came from taxes. A significant portion came from something else entirely. Captured ships. Captured cargo. Captured people. The corsair economy rested upon all 3. Contrary to the image often painted in novels, Barbary piracy was not simply a collection of unruly outlaws dividing stolen treasure on deserted beaches. It had become remarkably organized. Every expedition required official approval. Investors financed voyages. Crews signed agreements. Captured goods were carefully inventoried. Government officials collected taxes. Shares of the profits were distributed according to established rules. The captain received one portion, officers another. Ordinary sailors shared the remainder. The local government collected its percentage. The Ottoman authorities received theirs. Even piracy, once sufficiently successful, eventually develops accountants. History contains very few exceptions. Many of the Corsairs were no longer born in North Africa. This surprises many people today. The Mediterranean had become a melting pot of adventurers. Some captains had begun life in Italy, others in Greece, France, England, the Netherlands. Even Icelandic sailors occasionally appeared after long and improbable journeys. Some had been captured and converted to Islam. Others arrived voluntarily, drawn by promises of wealth and promotion unavailable back home. Religious conversion certainly played a role. So did ambition. People have crossed borders for opportunity since long before passports existed. Perhaps the most famous of these converts was a Dutchman named Jan Jansoen. Though his greatest exploits would come later, he represented a growing trend. European sailors, frustrated by limited opportunities in Christian navies, discovered that the Barbary States often cared far more about competence than ancestry. If you could command a ship, read the stars, repair a mast during a storm, or lead men successfully into battle, your birthplace mattered surprisingly little. The sea judged everyone equally. Poor sailors drowned regardless of nationality. Meanwhile, life aboard a corsair vessel settled into a routine both exhausting and strangely ordinary. Movies often depict pirates as constantly fighting, drinking, and searching for treasure. Reality proved considerably less exciting. Most days involved maintenance. Sails needed repair. Ropes wore out. Wood cracked beneath relentless sun. Fresh water spoiled. Food had to be rationed carefully. Every morning began with inspections. Every evening ended with repairs. Successful captains understood that ships neglected during peaceful days rarely survived stormy ones. Breakfast was simple: hard biscuit, olives, dried figs, perhaps cheese if supplies remained generous, fresh fish when fortune smiled. Coffee, increasingly popular throughout the Ottoman world, slowly found its way aboard many vessels. Strong, dark, bitter, perfect for sailors expected to remain alert through long night watches. Few traditions spread across the Mediterranean as successfully as coffee. Unlike empires, it never really went out of fashion. After breakfast came work. Always work. Deck scrubbed. Rigging inspected. Cannons cleaned. Powder kept dry. Weapons sharpened. Clothing repaired. A neglected ship became dangerous long before battle began. Saltwater possesses astonishing patience. Given enough time, it destroys almost everything humans build. Sailors learned to fight that quiet war every single day. The officers occupied an unusual position within this floating society. Most had earned their rank through experience rather than noble birth. A captain who repeatedly lost ships rarely remained captain for long. The sea had little respect for family titles. It preferred results. This practical meritocracy distinguished many corsair fleets from several contemporary European navies, where aristocratic birth sometimes mattered more than competence. Not always, but often enough to frustrate experienced sailors. Discipline remained strict. Contrary to popular legend, successful pirate ships did not tolerate chaos. A crew unable to obey commands during battle quickly ceased being a crew altogether. The punishment for theft from fellow sailors could be severe. Cowardice endangered everyone. Drunkenness while on duty invited disaster. Disobedience threatened the survival of the entire vessel. Freedom aboard ship existed within carefully understood limits. Even pirates required rules, especially pirates. At sea, time blurred together. Without calendars or newspapers, sailors measured life differently. By storms survived, ports visited, friends buried, ships captured. Every voyage became another chapter in a story that seemed endless. Weeks passed beneath identical skies. The sun rose. The sun set. Stars appeared. Watch changes followed one another with comforting regularity. The sea became both prison and home. Many sailors, after years aboard ship, found life on land strangely unsettling. Solid ground moved far less than they expected. Silence felt unnatural. Crowded cities seemed oddly confining after endless horizons. The sea changes people in ways difficult to explain, even after they leave it behind. Back in Algiers, another institution flourished: the slave markets. It is perhaps the darkest aspect of the Barbary Corsairs' history, one impossible to ignore. Imagine a busy square near the harbor. Newly captured prisoners stand beneath the relentless North African sun. Merchants inspect them. Interpreters ask questions. Doctors sometimes examine their health. Families cling desperately to one another whenever possible. Children search unfamiliar faces for reassurance that never comes. Some captives are purchased for domestic service, others for skilled trades. Strong young men may find themselves assigned to shipyards or construction projects. The fortunate hope for ransom. The unfortunate simply wait. Waiting becomes its own form of suffering. No one knows whether tomorrow will bring freedom or another year. Across Europe, religious organizations devoted themselves to redeeming captives. Monks traveled from city to city collecting donations. Church bells rang not only for worship, but to announce fundraising efforts. Families mortgaged farms, sold possessions, borrowed money. Every letter arriving from North Africa became both hope and heartbreak. Your husband is alive. Your son survives. Your daughter can be freed. If only the ransom can be paid. The Mediterranean became connected not merely by trade, but by grief. The Corsairs themselves rarely viewed captivity in purely emotional terms. To them, prisoners represented economic assets. That cold calculation disturbed European observers. Yet European states often behaved similarly toward Muslim captives. The language differed. The suffering did not. History frequently reminds us that cruelty rarely belongs to only one side. As Algiers prospered, neighboring Barbary cities sought to imitate its success. Tunis expanded its fleet. Tripoli welcomed ambitious captains. Smaller ports developed their own corsair communities. Competition emerged. Who captured the richest prizes? Who recruited the finest sailors? Who possessed the fastest ships? Professional rivalry has always existed, even among pirates. Perhaps especially among pirates. No one enjoys hearing another captain praised more loudly than himself. Hayreddin Barbarossa, meanwhile, spent increasing amounts of time in Constantinople. Age was finally beginning to catch him. He remained respected, feared, admired. But younger commanders increasingly carried out the dangerous voyages. He became something rarer, a living legend. Visitors sought his advice. Young officers listened carefully whenever he spoke. Stories about his early adventures multiplied with every retelling. Some undoubtedly became exaggerated. The sea encourages exaggeration. Every sailor improves a story just a little. By the 10th retelling, one storm becomes 3. 5 enemy ships become 15. A narrow escape becomes a miracle. It has probably been happening ever since the first canoe drifted away from shore. One evening, Hayreddin reportedly stood overlooking the Bosporus as hundreds of ships passed beneath the setting sun. Merchant vessels, fishing boats, war galleys, ferries. The water glowed gold beneath the fading light. Somewhere beyond the western horizon lay Algiers. Beyond that, Spain, Italy, France. The endless coastlines where his name had become legend. He had spent almost his entire life chasing horizons. Now the horizons came to him. But time, patient as ever, continued moving forward. A new generation of corsairs was already rising. Some would become even more daring, some more ruthless, others more famous in distant lands. The golden age was far from over. In many ways, it was only beginning. Because the next chapter of our story would carry the Barbary pirates beyond the Mediterranean itself, across the Atlantic approaches, to the coasts of Ireland, England, even Iceland. The sea was about to become much larger, and so were their ambitions. Beyond the Mediterranean, when no coast felt safe, there is a comforting illusion that many people living near the sea quietly believe. That danger belongs somewhere else. Surely the raids happen on another coastline, another island, another kingdom. Some distant place mentioned in letters or rumors carried by passing merchants. Not here, not this quiet fishing village. Not this peaceful bay where children collect shells and old fishermen argue about tides they have known their entire lives. For generations, thousands of Europeans believed exactly that. Then, one morning, unfamiliar sails appeared beyond the horizon. The illusion disappeared forever. For most of the 16th century, the Barbary Corsairs concentrated on the Mediterranean. It made perfect sense. The sea was crowded. Trade flourished. Merchant routes were predictable. The distances were manageable. Almost every profitable target lay within a few days' sailing. Why venture farther? Because eventually, opportunity always invites ambition. As European trade expanded into the Atlantic, wealth began flowing through waters beyond the narrow Strait of Gibraltar. Portuguese ships returned from Africa. Spanish treasure fleets crossed from the Americas. English merchants explored new markets. Dutch traders multiplied almost yearly. The Mediterranean was still rich. The Atlantic was becoming richer. The Corsairs noticed. Successful sailors always do. Stand for a moment on the cliffs overlooking the Strait of Gibraltar. To the north lies Spain. To the south, Morocco. Barely 14 kilometers separate Europe from Africa. On calm days, each continent seems close enough to touch. For centuries, this narrow passage had acted as the great doorway between two seas. Every vessel entering or leaving the Mediterranean passed through this bottleneck. Whoever watched the strait possessed extraordinary power. Merchant captains understood this. So did admirals. And naturally, pirates. One city would soon become famous for taking full advantage of that location. Sail. Situated along Morocco's Atlantic coast near the mouth of the Bou Rejrej River, Sail gradually transformed into something unlike almost anywhere else. It became a republic of corsairs, not entirely independent, not entirely controlled by any king. A strange political experiment where successful sea captains exercised remarkable influence over local government. Imagine a city where the most respected citizens are not scholars, nor noblemen, nor wealthy merchants, but men whose profession consists largely of capturing other people's ships. History occasionally invents societies that seem almost fictional. Sail was one of them. The city's harbor bustled with remarkable energy. Unlike Algiers, whose power rested partly upon Ottoman support, Sail developed its own distinct identity. Many of its inhabitants were Moriscos, Muslims expelled from Spain after the Reconquista. They carried memories of lost homes, confiscated property, forced conversions, and families scattered across continents. Those memories remained painfully fresh. For some, corsairing represented wealth. For others, it represented revenge. The two motivations often sailed together aboard the same ship. Life in Sail revolved around the tide. Every departure promised fortune. Every returning vessel attracted crowds eager to learn what had been captured. Children raced toward the harbor whenever lookouts announced approaching sails. Merchants prepared warehouses. Officials calculated taxes. Families searched incoming crews for familiar faces. Some ships returned overflowing with cargo. Others limped home barely afloat. A few never returned at all. The sea remained generous. It also remained unpredictable. By the early 17th century, Barbary corsairs were no longer content merely to dominate the Mediterranean. Their ships began appearing farther and farther north. Along Portugal, western France, the English Channel, the coast of Ireland. Eventually, even Iceland. Imagine the surprise. A fisherman in County Cork waking before dawn. He walks toward the harbor carrying nets repaired the previous evening. The air smells of wet grass and cold salt. The Atlantic breeze bites more sharply than the warm Mediterranean winds. Nothing about the morning feels unusual, until someone points toward the horizon. Dark sails, unfamiliar, moving quickly. At first, perhaps everyone assumes they belong to English traders or French merchants. Then panic begins spreading through the village. The bells ring. Dogs bark. People run toward their homes. Parents gather children. Boats are abandoned where they lie. The strangers are not merchants. They have come from astonishingly far away. Throughout coastal Europe, watchtowers became increasingly important. Many had existed for generations. Now they rarely stood empty. Lookouts spent long hours scanning endless water. The work demanded patience. Most days, nothing happened. But every watcher understood one terrible truth. The single day something did happen would matter far more than all the quiet days combined. Vigilance became a way of life. Communication systems improved remarkably. Signal fires, church bells, messenger riders, flags. Entire coastlines developed surprisingly sophisticated warning networks. A lookout spotting suspicious sails might trigger alarms spreading dozens of miles inland within hours. Villages practiced emergency plans. Livestock driven away from the shore. Families fled toward fortified towns. Church valuables hidden. Fishing boats hauled onto beaches. People adapted. Human beings almost always do. Yet adaptation could only accomplish so much. The Corsairs became increasingly bold. Some raids targeted isolated farms. Others attacked entire villages. Prisoners were marched back toward waiting ships. Livestock driven away. Storehouses emptied. Anything valuable disappeared. The raids often lasted only a few hours. The consequences endured for generations. Communities rebuilt. Families searched endlessly for missing relatives. Children grew up hearing stories of the day the pirates came. Memory itself became another inheritance. One of the most famous raids occurred in 1627. The target was not Spain, nor Italy, nor even Ireland. It was Iceland. Think about that for a moment. North African corsairs sailing all the way to the edge of the Arctic. It sounds almost impossible, yet they did. The voyage required extraordinary navigation. Weeks upon the open Atlantic. Violent storms. Cold, unfamiliar waters. Completely different coastlines. The men who completed that journey possessed remarkable seamanship. Whatever else history may say about them, no one doubted their skill. When the Corsairs reached Iceland, local communities hardly knew what they were seeing. Few imagined pirates from North Africa could possibly appear so far north. Several settlements were attacked. Hundreds of people were taken captive. Some eventually reached Algiers after an unimaginably long journey. Others never returned. For Icelanders, the event became known simply as Tyrkjarni, the Turkish abductions. Although many raiders were actually North African rather than Turkish. To frighten villagers, such distinctions mattered very little. Fear tends to simplify geography. Imagine one of those captives. A young woman raised among volcanic landscapes, icy rivers, and endless winter nights. Suddenly transported across Europe, across the Strait of Gibraltar, into the warmth of North Africa. Palm trees replacing birch forests. Arabic replacing Icelandic. The smell of spices replacing cold ocean air. The shock must have been almost indescribable. Entire worlds separated by thousands of miles collided inside one human life. History often measures distance with maps. Individuals experience it with memory. Not every raid ended successfully. Atlantic weather proved far less forgiving than the Mediterranean. Storms arrived without warning. Towering waves battered wooden hulls. Fog concealed dangerous coastlines. Many experienced Mediterranean sailors found the Atlantic unsettling. The ocean behaved differently. It breathed differently. It demanded different skills. Nature remained the greatest enemy any sailor would ever face, regardless of nationality. Back in Algiers and Sale, successful voyages fueled growing prosperity. New houses appeared. Mosques expanded. Markets overflowed with imported goods. Coffee houses filled each evening with sailors exchanging stories. Picture one of those coffee houses. Low wooden tables. Oil lamps casting warm light across whitewashed walls. The smell of roasted coffee beans drifting through the room. Veteran captains quietly discussing currents near Portugal. A young sailor listening wide-eyed to tales of Iceland. Someone inevitably exaggerating. Another politely pretending to believe him. Because every sailor deserves one impossible story, as long as it is entertaining enough. European governments responded in familiar ways. More warships. More coastal forts. More diplomatic missions. Occasional ransom negotiations. Sometimes military expeditions against North African ports. Yet the Corsairs remained resilient. Destroying one fleet simply encouraged another to form. Capturing one captain created opportunities for younger men seeking fame. The system proved surprisingly durable, because it rested upon economics as much as warfare. As long as maritime trade remained enormously profitable, someone would always attempt to intercept it. By now, Hayreddin Barbarossa himself had passed into legend. He died in Constantinople in 1546, long before many of these Atlantic expeditions occurred. Yet his influence remained everywhere. The institutions he helped build continued operating. The naval traditions he established endured. New captains invoked his name with admiration. European sailors still whispered it with unease. Few individuals shape history alone. The truly remarkable ones create systems that survive after they are gone. Hayreddin had accomplished exactly that. The Barbary Corsairs no longer depended upon one extraordinary leader. They had become an institution, and institutions are often far harder to defeat than individuals. But every institution eventually encounters a challenge it cannot permanently overcome. For the Barbary States, that challenge was already beginning to appear on the horizon, not in the form of one great admiral, nor one decisive battle, but through something quieter, something far more relentless. The steady rise of powerful national navies, the age of towering sailing warships, and an industrial world that would gradually leave the old corsair kingdoms behind. The tide, once again, was beginning to turn. Life in captivity, the hidden world behind the raids. Long after the cannons fell silent, long after the victorious crews divided their prize money, long after the captured ship disappeared beyond the horizon, another story continued. It was a quieter story, one that rarely appeared in paintings, one that kings seldom discussed in their speeches, one that unfolded not on the sea, but behind walls, behind locked gates, inside workshops, shipyards, homes, prisons, and marketplaces. Because for every famous corsair captain whose name filled history books, there were thousands of ordinary men, women, and children whose names slowly disappeared into silence. Tonight, before we continue following admirals and fleets, let us linger with them. History often remembers those who held the sword. It deserves, at least for a while, to remember those who did not. Imagine waking in Algiers as a newly arrived captive. The first sensation is confusion. The second is heat. If you had been captured somewhere along the coast of England or Ireland, the North African morning would feel almost unreal. The air itself seems heavier, the sunlight brighter. Even before breakfast, warmth rises from the white stone streets. Palm trees sway gently where oak trees once stood. The call to prayer echoes across the rooftops. You do not understand the words, but you understand immediately that you are very far from home, farther than you ever imagined possible. The harbor lies only a short walk away. Even if you cannot see it, you can hear it. Axes striking timber, sailors shouting, ropes groaning against wooden masts, donkeys carrying heavy loads through crowded streets, blacksmiths hammering glowing iron into anchors and nails. The city never truly sleeps. Commerce begins before sunrise. So does captivity. Contrary to popular imagination, not every prisoner was immediately chained to an oar. The Barbary States were practical societies. Healthy prisoners represented valuable investments. Owners wanted them alive, skilled, productive. A trained carpenter was worth more than an exhausted laborer. A physician more valuable than an ordinary sailor. A shipwright far more useful than someone with no trade at all. Your future often depended less upon who you were than upon what you knew. Interpreters became surprisingly important. The Mediterranean was astonishingly multilingual. Arabic, Turkish, Berber dialects, Spanish, Italian, Greek, French, Portuguese, English, Dutch, Hebrew, even Icelandic on very rare occasions. Someone had to translate contracts, ransom negotiations, business agreements, court proceedings, religious discussions. Language itself became a commodity. Some prisoners survived largely because they could speak several tongues. Words occasionally proved more valuable than swords. Many captives entered private households. Modern readers sometimes imagine every prisoner locked inside dark dungeons. Reality proved more complicated. Some worked as servants, others as gardeners, cooks, stable hands, craftsmen. Many lived difficult lives. Some encountered surprisingly humane masters. Others suffered cruelty almost daily. Human behavior has never been wonderfully predictable. Two neighboring households might treat prisoners in completely different ways. History resists simple categories. Imagine a carpenter from Sicily, captured while transporting timber. Instead of rowing aboard a galley, he now repairs furniture inside a wealthy merchant's home. His tools remain familiar. His language does not. Each evening, he quietly counts the years since he last saw his family. Perhaps someone back home still believes he is alive. Perhaps they held a funeral long ago. Not knowing can become its own kind of prison. Women experienced captivity differently. Some entered domestic service. Others became part of wealthy households. Some eventually married. Sometimes voluntarily. Identity slowly changed. Not all at once. Little by little. Memory itself became negotiable. Religion stood at the center of many lives. Christian captives often clung fiercely to their faith. Muslim authorities generally permitted Christian worship under certain restrictions, although circumstances varied greatly. Some prisoners converted to Islam. A few did so sincerely. Others hoped conversion might improve their lives. Still others resisted until death. Only the individuals themselves truly knew what existed inside their hearts. History records actions. Motives are much harder to preserve. Across Europe, entire religious orders dedicated themselves to one purpose: buying freedom. The Trinitarians, the Mercedarians. For centuries, these monks traveled tirelessly raising money for ransoms. Picture one such friar arriving in a small Spanish village. His robe dusty from weeks on the road. Church bells announce his visit. Families gather inside the square. He reads names aloud. This man still lives. This woman may yet be freed. If enough money can be collected, hope becomes painfully specific. Every coin matters. Every donation shortens someone's imprisonment, or fails to. Letters crossed the Mediterranean constantly. Some reached their destination. Many did not. Imagine writing to your wife after 5 years in captivity. The paper is precious, ink expensive, space limited. You cannot possibly describe everything. So instead you write simply, "I remain alive." For words. Enough to sustain hope for another year. Perhaps. If the letter arrives. Ransom negotiations could last months, sometimes years. A wealthy merchant might regain freedom quickly. A poor fisherman often waited much longer. Economics determined mercy with ruthless honesty. There existed official ransom rates, informal bargaining, political exchanges, religious diplomacy. Everything had a price, including freedom. Some captives escaped. These stories spread rapidly. One prisoner steals a fishing boat. Another bribes a guard. A third slips away during construction work outside the city walls. The journeys home often proved almost as dangerous as captivity itself. Imagine escaping Algiers without money, without local knowledge, without speaking Arabic. Thousands of miles from home, freedom begins with escape. It does not end there. Not every former captive wished to leave. This surprises many readers. Yet after 20 or 30 years, some prisoners had built entirely new lives. They had married, raised children, learned new languages, opened workshops, converted religions. Their old homeland existed mostly in memory. Returning meant becoming strangers once again. Home itself had changed. So had they. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to adapt. Sometimes adaptation becomes permanent. Meanwhile, in Christian Europe, Muslim prisoners experienced remarkably similar uncertainties. Captured Ottoman sailors labored in Spanish galleys. North African corsairs filled prisons in Malta. Thousands worked in Italian dockyards, French ports, Portuguese fortresses. Both civilizations condemned slavery while simultaneously practicing it. Neither side possessed clean hands, only different justifications. History is uncomfortable precisely because it refuses easy heroes. Back aboard the galleys, life remained relentless. Whether Christian or Muslim, enslaved rowers shared remarkably similar routines. The benches remained equally hard, the chains equally heavy, the sun equally merciless. Imagine sitting shoulder to shoulder with strangers from half a dozen countries. One man speaks Greek, another Arabic, another Catalan, another Albanian. You cannot understand one another's words, yet all understand the drum. Its rhythm commands every movement. Pull, recover. Pull, recover. Hour after hour, the sea itself seems to keep time. Disease represented another constant threat. Crowded ships became ideal breeding grounds for illness. Fresh water spoiled. Food rotted. Insects multiplied. A minor wound could become fatal. Doctors did what they could, which, by modern standards, was often not very much. Medicine in the 16th century relied upon experience, observation, herbs, prayer, and a remarkable amount of optimism. Patients appreciated all of them. Recovery remained unpredictable. Yet despite hardship, laughter somehow survived. It always does. Sailors invented jokes. Captives exchanged stories. Children played games using pebbles and sticks. Someone sang quietly while repairing nets. Another carved tiny wooden figures during precious moments of rest. Human dignity possesses astonishing resilience, even inside the darkest circumstances, perhaps especially there. Walk through Algiers at sunset. The day's heat finally begins to fade. Shadows stretch across the narrow streets. Market sellers gather their remaining goods. The smell of grilled fish drifts from nearby homes. Lanterns appear one by one. Somewhere, a musician begins playing a slow melody on an oud. Nearby, another answers with a flute. The city softens. Even prisoners pause for a moment to watch the sky turn orange above the harbor. The same sunset touches Spain, Italy, France, England. Across the Mediterranean, families gaze at identical colors without knowing that loved ones, separated by thousands of miles, are watching the very same evening sky. The sea divides, the sky does not. As the 17th century progressed, captivity remained one of the defining realities of Mediterranean life. Entire generations grew up expecting that someone they knew might disappear, not because they had died, but because they had been carried away by the sea. It became part of ordinary conversation, part of local memory, part of family history. And yet, beyond the horizon, another transformation was quietly unfolding. European kingdoms were becoming stronger, navies larger, cannons heavier, ships more powerful than anything Hayreddin Barbarossa had ever imagined. The age of the galley was beginning to fade. The age of the great sailing warship had arrived, and with it came the slow, relentless decline of the Barbary Corsairs. Not through one spectacular defeat, but through the steady march of history itself. The tide turns, the long decline of the Barbary Pirates. Nothing in history lasts forever. Not kingdoms, not religions, not trade routes, not languages. not even fear. For nearly 3 centuries, the words Barbary Corsair had carried a particular weight across Europe. Mothers whispered them to children who wandered too close to lonely beaches. Fishermen studied every unfamiliar sail with quiet suspicion. Merchants calculated the cost of escorts before every voyage. Church bells stood ready to sound alarms at a moment's notice. An entire way of life had grown around the expectation that danger might emerge from the sea. But sometime during the late 17th century, something subtle began to change. No one noticed it all at once. History rarely announces its turning points. Instead, the old world slowly began giving way to a new one. Walk through the harbor of Algiers around the year 1700. At first glance, little appears different. Corsair ships still lie at anchor. Shipwrights still hammer away beneath the warm North African sun. Markets remain crowded. Coffee houses overflow with conversation. Captured prizes still arrive often enough to keep merchants optimistic. Yet beneath the familiar routine, invisible pressures are building. European ships are changing. They are becoming larger, stronger, heavily armed. The long, elegant galley, the vessel that had dominated the Mediterranean since ancient Greece, is quietly losing its place. For centuries, galleys ruled these waters because they could move regardless of the wind. Rows of disciplined oarsmen pushed them steadily across calm seas. They maneuvered beautifully in narrow channels. They excelled during boarding actions. They represented the perfect Mediterranean warship, until technology made them obsolete. The great sailing ships of Northern Europe brought something new: firepower. Rows upon rows of heavy cannons mounted along broad wooden hulls. A single ship of the line could unleash a devastating broadside that would have astonished 16th century admirals. Imagine Hayreddin Barbarossa standing on the deck of one of these enormous vessels. 3 towering masts, several gun decks, dozens upon dozens of heavy bronze or iron cannons, hundreds of sailors working together with astonishing precision. He would have recognized the principles of seamanship: the stars, the wind, the discipline. Everything else would have seemed like another age, because it was. Naval warfare no longer depended primarily upon boarding enemy ships. Now victory increasingly belonged to artillery. Ships fought at distances unimaginable a century earlier. Captains maneuvered for firing positions rather than opportunities to grapple alongside. The sea itself became wider, not physically, tactically. Corsair tactics, perfected over generations, suddenly seemed less effective against these floating fortresses. European governments also changed. Many kingdoms had once relied upon private merchants, local militias, or temporary fleets. Now they built permanent navies, professional officer corps, standardized training, massive dockyards, national bureaucracies capable of supporting fleets year after year. The difference was profound. The Barbary States still produced excellent captains. Europe increasingly produced entire naval systems. Institutions eventually outweighed individual brilliance. Meanwhile, commerce itself transformed. Insurance companies expanded. Merchant convoys became more organized. International diplomacy improved, at least occasionally. Trade routes diversified. Even when corsairs captured one vessel, countless others reached their destinations. The economic balance slowly shifted. Raiding remained profitable. It no longer shaped the Mediterranean quite as it once had. Life inside Algiers reflected these gradual changes. Young men still dreamed of becoming famous captains. Old veterans still filled coffee houses with impossible stories. Shipbuilders continued launching sleek corsair vessels. Yet some merchants quietly invested more heavily in peaceful trade than maritime raiding. Commerce, after all, usually provides steadier income than piracy. Less exciting. Far more predictable. Accountants have always appreciated predictability. European diplomats increasingly arrived carrying treaties instead of cannons. Sometimes, the Barbary rulers signed agreements with France, England, the Dutch Republic, various Italian states. Such treaties usually promised safe passage for ships flying particular flags. Until the next disagreement, international relations remained wonderfully complicated. One nation's protected merchant became another nation's perfectly acceptable target. The sea, once again, ignored paperwork. Not every European nation accepted paying tribute. Some did. Some refused. The Dutch occasionally sent powerful fleets. The French bombarded coastal cities. The English Royal Navy launched punitive expeditions. Spanish forces continued their own campaigns. Bombardments became increasingly common. Algiers endured repeated attacks. The city rebuilt. Again. And again. White walls repaired. Cannons replaced. Harbors dredged. Life continued. Mediterranean cities possessed remarkable resilience. Centuries of warfare had taught them persistence. One evening after a French bombardment, imagine walking through the city. Dust still hangs in the warm air. Several buildings lie damaged. Workers clear broken masonry into waiting carts. Children, astonishingly, have already resumed playing nearby. A baker has reopened despite shattered windows. Fishermen prepare tomorrow's nets as though nothing extraordinary has happened. Ordinary people possess an extraordinary gift. They continue living. History depends upon that quiet courage far more than it admits. Far across the Atlantic, another new power was quietly emerging: the United States. Freshly independent after its revolution against Britain, its merchants soon discovered an uncomfortable reality. British naval protection no longer accompanied American ships. Mediterranean commerce suddenly became much more dangerous. American vessels looked like easy targets. The Barbary Corsairs noticed almost immediately. History enjoys introducing new players, usually with rather unpleasant surprises. The rulers of Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Morocco demanded tribute from the young republic. At first, the Americans paid. It seemed cheaper than war. For a while. Eventually, opinions changed. In the United States, many leaders argued that continual payments only encouraged further demands. A stronger response became inevitable. Thus began the Barbary Wars, conflicts that introduced the young American Navy to the Mediterranean. But that is a story deserving its own documentary. For our purposes, it marks something important. The world was changing. Even nations barely born now possessed fleets capable of challenging the old Corsair kingdoms. The Mediterranean belonged to a new era. The final blow came not from one dramatic sea battle, but from empire. In 1830, France invaded Algeria. Officially, the invasion followed a diplomatic dispute. Unofficially, France possessed broader ambitions: colonial expansion, strategic control, prestige. The reasons were many. The result was simple. French forces captured Algiers. The centuries-old Corsair state effectively came to an end. The harbor that had once launched Hayreddin Barbarossa's fleets now welcomed an entirely different master. The age of the Barbary Pirates was over. Walk one last time along the waterfront. The shipyards still exist. The sea still smells of salt and pine. The gulls still argue over scraps with timeless confidence. Yet something essential has vanished. No captains gather crews for grand Corsair expeditions. No anxious merchant convoys scan constantly for red-bearded admirals. No coastal villages expect raids with every unfamiliar sail. The Mediterranean remains beautiful. It has become quieter, at least in this particular way. And so, as the evening settles across the water, we should ask the question every historian eventually faces. Who were the Barbary Pirates? Were they ruthless criminals? Certainly, many were. Were they patriotic defenders of Muslim North Africa against aggressive European expansion? Many sincerely believed exactly that. Were they businessmen pursuing extraordinary profit? Without question. Were they naval officers serving an empire? Often. Were they victims who became victors? Or victors who created new victims? Perhaps both. History rarely permits only one answer. The Barbary Corsairs emerged from a world shaped by crusades, conquest, exile, slavery, trade, empire, religion, and survival. They were products of their age, just as every civilization is. That does not excuse cruelty, nor does it erase suffering. But it reminds us that history becomes clearer when we replace simple villains and heroes with complicated human beings. because complicated human beings are usually what we find. Now the sun has almost disappeared beneath the western horizon. The Mediterranean glows with deep shades of gold, amber, and violet. Fishing boats return slowly toward harbor. Their lanterns begin appearing one after another across the darkening water. A cool breeze carries the scent of salt through the quiet evening. The same sea that carried Phoenician traders, Roman warships, Byzantine merchants, Arab explorers, Venetian galleys, Ottoman admirals, and the feared Barbary Corsairs, continues its endless rhythm. The waves touch the shore exactly as they did 500 years ago. They remember none of the names. Not Hayreddin, not Andrea Doria, not Charles V, not the countless anonymous sailors who lived and died upon their surface. Only we remember. And perhaps that is why history matters. Because the sea keeps no books. It builds no monuments. It offers no explanations. It simply keeps moving beneath the moonlight, carrying tomorrow's ships just as faithfully as yesterday's. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine one final lantern far out upon the calm Mediterranean. Its reflection stretches gently across the dark water. The wind has softened. The waves have grown quiet. The voices of sailors have faded into the distance. The great age of the Barbary pirates has slipped beneath the horizon. And the sea, as it always does, waits patiently for the next story. End of documentary.